Russians are probably the most feared fighters in MMA. Although they are not the biggest power in the sport in terms of total number of fighters or UFC champions, we have to agree that most Russian fighters are of the highest level. They have gained fame over the years for being very cold, pragmatic, and with impeccable physical conditioning. And admit it, when you see that your favorite fighter is going to face a Russian, you're already a little wary. But if the conventional Russians already bring a certain fear, imagine when we talk about the high-ranking ones. And I'm talking, of course, about the guys from Dagestan, more specifically the Nurmagomedov clan, led by Khabib Nurmagomedov. They are seen as the top echelon of Russian MMA. Only unbeaten fighters, great champions, and they rarely lose a fight come out of them. But that changed a little in 2025, because for the first time, we saw a Nurmagomedov losing at his own game and being humiliated in a title fight. And that's what we're going to talk about in today's fight story, which will be about the fight between Merab Duvalishvili and Umar Nurmagomedov. After beating Sean O'Malley at UFC 306, Merab Duvalishvili was immediately asked about his next opponent, who was even in the audience. And we're talking about Umar Nurmagomedov, Khabib Nurmagomedov's cousin, world champion in combat sambo, and with an undefeated record in MMA of 18 wins and no losses. The most curious fact about this interaction between the two is that immediately Merab refused the fight right in front of Joe Rogan. Well, not just Joe Rogan. After all, the scenario there was preset. The two appeared on the big screen in front of 20,001 people and millions around the world. And he didn't just refuse the fight inside the octagon, but in the weeks and months that passed, Merab continued to refuse to face Umar in every way, saying that Umar didn't deserve to fight for the title because, despite his winning streak, he had only beaten one guy within the ranking, which in this case was Corey Sandhagen, which in fact is an argument that makes sense. But Merab's refusal was so constant, it was so unusual that many people began to theorize that he was afraid of facing the Russian and that he was trying everything to get out of this fight. So much so that he asked for an immediate rematch against Sean O'Malley. He asked for it himself, but there was no way. It had to be Umar, so Merab had to accept the fight, which was scheduled for January 2025 at the co-event of UFC 311. And that same night, Islam Makhachev, also a member of the Nurmagomedov clan, would defend his lightweight belt for the fourth time. With the fight scheduled, we had the first press conference of the event, which was a show in itself. Two guys from the Caucasus and a lousy Englishman insulting each other for almost half an hour. In addition to the personal feud between the two, this fight also symbolized a historical rivalry between Russia and Georgia, marked by several armed conflicts over the years and also political disagreements. Another interesting fact is that Umar would be the third member of the Nurmagomedov clan to attempt to become UFC champion, and he had a huge responsibility because his predecessors made history. Khabib, for example, established himself as perhaps the greatest lightweight in UFC history. And Islam Makhachev, who came right after him, is getting close to Khabib or maybe even surpassed him. Now, Umar had to continue this consolidated success of the clan, all this sovereignty of the Nurmagomedovs. And of course, with all this success, this habit of always winning and never losing a single round, it was inevitable that at some point arrogance would take over the clan's leadership. And the same happened with Umar. The Russian simply did not give Merab the respect he deserved. In fact, he already considered the fight won and, in interviews, said that he did not see the slightest chance and thought it was impossible for Merab to beat him. Well, folks, if there's one thing I learned from watching Star Wars, it's that, as Count Dooku used to say, twice the pride brings twice the fall. The big day arrived. Merab and Umar faced off for the UFC bantamweight title. The fight began with a very lively first round, with both fighters exchanging blows while standing, despite the fact that both fighters' specialty, especially Umar's, is grappling, as has always been the case in the Nurmagomedov clan. However, in the Russian's first takedown attempt, he simply couldn't find anything against the champion. And then Umar was a bit surprised, because it's not common for him to not be able to take down the first time. Better yet, it's very rare for him to try a takedown and find such a strong defense. Still, he remained calm because he was winning the first round, and in the second round, he gained even more confidence when he finally managed to take down Merab, and was also taking advantage in this round. In other words, up until now, everything was going very well. It was already 2-0 for the Russian. But the truth is, guys, that during all this time, Merab's engine was just warming up. And now, starting in the third round, the real fight would begin. Merab started the third round putting on pressure, trying takedowns, throwing the Russian against the fence. The exchange continued, but Merab was getting stronger and stronger with his standing strikes. Umar tried his takedowns, but now they weren't working anymore. He realized that something was changing in this fight. Merab was no longer the same fighter he had been in the early rounds, and the champion was also more daring. He managed to land a takedown and let the Russian get up as if he were mocking him, saying, "Look, I can do that whenever I want." And he did it right away, but this time Umar got up quickly. Still, look at this interesting fact. Umar had never been taken down in the UFC, and in that round alone, he was taken down twice. Meanwhile, Merab was smiling, talking to the commentators, having fun. He was calm, joking with the Russian. Umar tried to take him down again, but now it looked like Merab was a block of concrete. He tried to use all his strength to take down the champion, who in turn raised his arms mockingly, making fun of the other one while he tried everything to take him down. At the end of the third round, Merab won the round, and as if this increase in his pace wasn't enough, the champion's coach, Ray Longo, even asked him to pick up the pace even more. Meanwhile, Khabib was already going crazy in the corner. He realized that his cousin was in danger, that a drastic change of scenery had occurred. The fourth round begins, and now it is Merab who is putting pressure on his feet, and for the third time, he manages to take the Russian down. Umar is increasingly frustrated and tired. He can't keep up with Merab, who in turn seems to be still in the first round. He barely got tired. To make matters worse, Khabib's cousin was trying to take him down, but now Merab wasn't even moving. Not only that, but he continued to mock and humiliate the challenger. And then Merab managed to apply another takedown, this time right in front of Khabib, who was going crazy in the corner. The fourth round is over, and now we see an iconic scene. After seeing so many videos, so many people talking, so much praise for the physical conditioning of the Nurmagomedov clan, now we see Umar Nurmagomedov completely exhausted, sitting on the break bench with that look of defeat, with that tired look, head down. He was being outclassed in the gas and outclassed in the grappling. In other words, we saw a Nurmagomedov being outclassed at his own game, suffering from his own spell. Meanwhile, Merab was on his toes and ready for the fifth and final round. And now it was the champion's show, who continued to attack, pressing with takedowns, while Umar was completely exhausted. In the final stretch of the fight, Merab threw the Russian to the ground and mocked him once again. With this takedown, he broke Georges St. Pierre's historic record for most takedowns applied in UFC history, and extended the record by applying 2 more takedowns until the end of the fight. In this fight alone, Umar Nurmagomedov was taken down more times than in all the fights of his career combined. The fight came to an end, and Merab Duvalishvili defeated Umar Nurmagomedov, defending his belt and ruining the Russians' invincibility. Well, my dear friends, what have we learned from this story? We have learned that the Russians and the Nurmagomedov clan are not exactly invincible. And if I mentioned Star Wars earlier, here I will mention again something that the wise master Qui-Gon Jinn said: "There is always a bigger fish." And that's it, folks. That was the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the notification bell so you don't miss the next content. And that's it. Thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.